Learning Theory for the Agricultural Law Student, Jake Nelson, ALEC 533. According to Shunk, behavioral learning has its foundations focusing on environments and how their components influence learners, really rather than focusing on internal cognitive processes. Most of the great psychologists who were proponents of this school asserted that, most importantly, learning was a method of conditioning responses to stimuli. Basically, reward or punishment gives symbolic meaning to a behavior, and associated situations are influenced by the response. It was this modern take by Skinner, operant conditioning, that lent the terms antecedent or an initial discriminant stimulus, behavioral response to this, and a consequence, which either reinforced or deterred from the behavioral outcome. To change an existing behavior, shaping is utilized to support desired learning outcomes by giving reinforcements to simple behaviors in a chain like succession until a complex outcome is achieved. This seems very elementary, but before we can explain a higher learning procedure, it is correct to first give credence to the very human processes that are behaviorism. And research shows that behavioral approaches applied to real world situations are actually rather effective. As a lawyer, especially with an agricultural focus or judge with such background, the power to affect public policy is always present. According to Prentice, the use of behaviorism is paramount when publicly endorsing certain behaviors. One must always be cognizant that they serve a higher purpose of upholding the laws of the United States and representing clients that are usually facing troubling circumstances. So, here, the use of reinforcement should be applied to constructive behavior because, with enough support behind a harmful stance, it might become the conditioned response to assume that malpractice is the norm. Also, as a pseudo political figure, agricultural attorneys should be knowledgeable of the consequences of their behaviors beyond a single ruling. Many times, cases set national precedents. What is missing here, suggests Staden and Bueno, is how active the learner actually is in a behavioral experience. This emphasizes the lack of study and beliefs, values, emotions, and other psychological phenomena. Unlike many trite conspiracy theories, humans are not political lab rats and have more volition than behaviorism may suggest. This brings us to a more internal theory. According to Shunk, social cognitive theory still incorporates environmental context. In this, Bandura's theory, reciprocation in a triadic model where the environment, personal factors, and behaviors can be influenced by the others explicate learning. Firstly, a stimulus is absorbed through the senses and translated in the brain to a symbolic knowledge, which acts as directorial cues for behavior. Here, learners can garner knowledge through an actual interaction with an environmental factor or seeing or hearing about a model doing the same. Both instances, even virtual environments, can be coded symbolically into schema that decides behaviors. Also, here, learners are more responsible for the intake of information. In self observation, learners are actively analyzing their successes and activities and using self judgment to evaluate outcomes compared to desired goals. A self reaction is then created from this information. Additionally, models as perceived by the learner, through their existing values, beliefs, and cognitive schema can be more or less valuable. Modeling in social cognitive theory is incredibly valuable because it easily increases learning opportunity and reduces risk. Modeling, although effective, is never seen as unfailingly followed. When learners see progress in knowledge acquisition, they become more motivated. As previously alluded, this simply means visibly getting closer to accomplishing goals defined by an entity that is valued or set by oneself. Goals don't need to be effortless, though. A bit of attainable hard work adds positively to one's self concept. It must also be stated that outcome indications are perceived, and what one thinks as a success is subjective. So, here learners must first recognize knowledge to be developed, give mental attentiveness to a process in attaining it, and be motivated enough to cognizantly use what has been garnered. In agricultural law, professionals will be regularly expected to take on intimidating organizations. A student who thinks of themselves as the lowly newcomer might be put off by environmental challenges that are big businesses, food lobbies, and trade associations. However, by joining a firm as a clerk in their later years of law school, students can be exposed to live models if they take the initiative to do so. This can counter their initial reaction and put the environment on their side as they get actively involved in the job they will soon perform. Reciprocally, by knowing in depth legal procedures, their behavior can better prosecute malpractice, in effect, changing the original factors by which they were intimidated. By understanding and congratulating one's progress, one can use knowledge markers as incentive for becoming a better attorney. Here again, we see the importance of having set values when entering the legal world, according to Asofsky, Bandura, and Zimbardo and Weiner. One must never disengage from the morals that they hold important. In rejecting what once was esteemed, lawyers can go as far as giving death penalties. This sort of self blinding is also done when attorneys feel they aren't making a large enough impact. By keeping successes ever in mind, lawyers can stay present and better serve their public. As already touched upon, according to Schunk, humans receive stimuli through their five senses. In information processing theory, our experiences are coded into something the brain can understand. And in a sense, this changes the way the mind works and perceives more knowledge. Firstly, it is input as we experience a learning situation. This is where sense transitions from this outward process to a more mental one. This is put in the working memory and through reflection can be stored in the long term memory. Exercising the concept solidifies its place here and makes it more likely that one will be able to retrieve it. This is the point where the ubiquitous schema comes up. Schema is existing knowledge that creates certain meaning about prior experiences. Schema is a conglomerate of small bits of knowledge to create larger concepts. By connecting an experience to already created meaning, new knowledge is embedded in the long term memory. This is termed assimilation. Accommodation is creating schema from scratch by avoiding linking and working to create new concepts to better understand a new experience. What makes this theory plausible is a human gift to attach abstract meaning to things and situations to live fuller lives and being able to translate that experience. Humans are also able to organize information where this easily can be utilized. And in the use of schemas, humans are able to see the world through personal filters. Hollander Blumoff, on page 167 of their work, assert that individuals are not information processing machines that perceive information neutrally and accurately every time. This brings up a very important point for agricultural law students and any proponents of information processing theory. With its heavy dependency on schema as lenses through which to view life situations, one must question how this could affect acceptive, objective views. Giving the example of ego, a client may not think they deserve a sentence that is usually given under the law. But looking at the law as an unwavering entity, but also taking into consideration the client's usual trying situation, a lawyer can develop empathy and better understand each side in a case. This, however, will take cognizantly creating schema from others' points of view and actively putting oneself in an even opposing counsel's position. According to Shunk, constructionists take a unique stance on the acquisition of knowledge. In fact, it isn't about acquiring anything, it's about constructing what is learned. Here, motivation is seen as innate. An ever present curiosity pushes people to learn what they do. And again, subjectivity is emphasized as each person's experiences are specific to themselves. In constructivism, we are talking in terms of truth. Cognitively, truth can be made internally as a sort of radical worldview. Truth can be constructed socially, one person to another for larger concepts, or truth can be constructed also internally, but more as an objective reality that all beings experience. These aforementioned types are really a continuum whereby a constructionist may place their views. According to Kurokawa, there is a novel way of looking at law procedures called legal constructivism. A legal education, as agricultural law students will quickly find, is based on tried and true ways of interpreting laws. Law, in this theory, is seen as ever-changing and conforming to ethical standards of society. Many would be aghast at such a notion that justice is only justice for today's justice. It really is on what prepared responses are based, knowing what most counsels will interpret a law to have a certain meaning as. Although there are timeless guiding principles in our great American legal system, it is not without its failures. A student lawyer, while being set in their moral standards, shouldn't be entirely inflexible for the mere reason of human error. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening.